You already know the story. Perseus, the mirrored shield, the winged sandals, the hero who looked away, found the angle and swung the sword, the head that turned men to stone, carried off in a bag, the monster slain. It is one of the most famous myths in Western civilization. Painted, sculpted, filmed, retold. Perseus stands triumphant. Medusa's head hangs severed. We have told this story for thousands of years as a story about a hero. But myths accumulate layers. And if you go back far enough, before the polished Olympian version, before the hero's journey template, before the Renaissance painters made it a symbol of righteous conquest, what you find is considerably more complicated. Medusa, in the oldest surviving layers of the mythology, is not primarily a monster to be slain. She is something far older, something that predated the Olympian gods, something that the Greeks themselves, in their more honest moments, acknowledged was not evil in any simple sense. She is a Gorgon, and the Gorgons, before they were three hideous sisters in a cave at the edge of the world, were something else entirely. Today we're talking about the real Medusa, where she came from, what she represented, and why the Greeks feared her in a way that goes much deeper than the fear of being turned to stone. The word Gorgon almost certainly predates classical Greek mythology. Scholars have traced its root to a Proto-Greek word meaning something like terrible, but not in the simple sense of frightening, in the sense of a specific category of sacred terror, the kind of awe that stops you not because you fear for your life, but because you are in the presence of something operating on a different register of reality entirely. The Greeks called this Deinos, sometimes translated as terrible, sometimes as wondrous, sometimes as uncanny. It is a feeling you get when you encounter something that is both magnificent and deeply wrong, both beautiful and deadly, both real and somehow more than real. The Gorgons belong to that category. In Hesiod's Theogony, written around 700 BCE, the Gorgons are not primarily described in terms of appearance. They are described in terms of location, at the edge of the world, beyond the ocean, in the direction of night and the dead. Three sisters, Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa, and two of them are immortal. Only Medusa can be killed. That detail matters. We'll come back to it. What strikes you about the oldest descriptions is not the snake hair or the petrifying gaze. Those elements come later, elaborated over centuries. What strikes you is the location. The Gorgons live at the threshold, at the edge of the known world, at the boundary between the ordered cosmos the Greeks inhabited and the formless darkness beyond it. They are not monsters in the world. They are monsters at the world's edge, guarding the border between existence and non-existence. And their faces appear everywhere in ancient Greece, not in frightening places, on temples, on armor, on coins, on the aegis of Athena herself, goddess of wisdom and civilization. The Gorgon face was protective, apotropaic, meaning used to ward off evil. You put the thing that frightens you on your shield, not because you worship it, because nothing that comes against you wants to look at it directly. Medusa's name almost certainly means guardian or protectress, from a root related to the Greek word for wisdom and practical knowledge, cognate with medos, counsel, thought, and also the root of Medea's name. Medusa, etymologically, is a wise guardian. She is also, in the pre-classical tradition, almost certainly a goddess, not a monster, a goddess. The scholar Jane Ellen Harrison, in her landmark 1903 work, Prolegomena to the Study of Greek Religion, argued that Medusa was originally a deity associated with the earth, with death, and with chthonic powers governing the underworld and the cycles of life and decay. a powerful female figure whose face is so full of divine intensity that to look upon it directly is fatal. This is not a monster's power. This is a God's power. The face that turns men to stone is not the face of a creature trying to harm you. It is the face of a being whose fundamental nature is incompatible with mortal consciousness. Not malicious, just too much, like looking directly at the sun. The problem is not the sun. The problem is with eyes that weren't made to receive that much light. And then, somewhere in the long transition from the archaic religious world to the classical Olympian world, something happened to Medusa. She became a monster. The version most people know. 3 hideous sisters, snake hair, stone gaze, cave at the edge of the world. Perseus kills her. Done. But there is another version, Ovid's in the Metamorphoses, that is one of the most disturbing passages in all of classical literature, precisely because it is told so matter-of-factly. In Ovid's telling, Medusa was not born a monster. She was born a woman, beautiful, famous especially for her hair. She was a priestess of Athena, and then Poseidon, god of the sea, one of the 3 most powerful beings in the Olympian cosmos, raped her in Athena's temple. What happened next is the part that should stop you. Athena punished Medusa, not Poseidon, not the god who committed the violation in Athena's own sacred space. Athena transformed the victim, turned Medusa's celebrated hair into snakes, made her face so terrible that anyone who looked at it would turn to stone, condemned her to live at the edge of the world until a hero came to kill her. The punishment fell on the one who was wronged. Ovid tells this almost as a footnote. Perseus has brought Medusa's head to a dinner party, using it as a weapon, and a guest asks where he got it. Perseus explains, "She used to be beautiful, but she was violated in Athena's temple, and Athena punished her for it." The head goes on being used as a weapon. The party continues. The casualness is what makes it unbearable. The mythology doesn't pause to register that something unjust has occurred. It just moves on. The story has already been decided. But Ovid put it in there. And once you see it, it reframes everything. Here is a fact about ancient Greek culture that takes a moment to fully land. Medusa's face was everywhere. On the breastplate of Alexander the Great, on the walls of the treasury of Atreus, on the pediment of the Temple of Artemis at Corfu, one of the oldest surviving examples of monumental Greek sculpture, where a massive Gorgon is the central figure, flanked by the gods. On the shields of Greek soldiers going into battle, on the doors of tombs, on the bottoms of drinking vessels, so that when you tilted back a cup of wine, a Gorgon's face was staring up at you. This is not the treatment you give a monster. This is a treatment you give a protective power. The Gorgonian was one of the most common apotropaic symbols in the ancient Mediterranean, used to keep evil away, understood to have genuine protective power. And this usage predates the Perseus myth by centuries. People were using Medusa's face for protection before the story of how Perseus obtained it had been fully standardized. This is significant. It suggests that the monster layer of Medusa's identity was added on top of something older, a goddess, a protective power, and that the older layer kept bleeding through even after the myth had officially designated her as the thing Perseus killed. The soldiers who put the Gorgon face on their shields understood something the Perseus myth doesn't acknowledge. They weren't carrying a trophy, they were carrying a guardian. To understand why the Perseus myth was constructed the way it was, you have to understand what it was doing politically and religiously. The classical Greek Olympian religion, The Zeus and the 12 god structure we think of as Greek mythology was not always a dominant framework. It was, in significant part, a replacement. The older layers of Greek religious life were more chthonic, more focused on earth deities and female divine figures whose authority did not derive from Zeus. The shift to the Olympian order was a shift in cosmological power from earth to sky, from old gods to new gods, from female powers of the underworld to male powers of Olympus. The myth of Perseus killing Medusa fits neatly into this pattern. Medusa is old religion. She is chthonic, connected to the earth and underworld. She is female. Her power is automatic and total. It doesn't require action, intention, or divine backing. She simply is what she is, and what she is can kill you. Perseus is new religion. He is backed by Athena, born from Zeus's own head, representing reason and order over primal female power. He uses a reflective shield, technology, cleverness, indirection. He doesn't face Medusa directly. He sidesteps her power by refusing to engage with it on its own terms. The myth is, on one reading, a story about how the new order defeated the old, how the Olympian gods and the civilizational project they represent triumphed over the pre-Olympian powers that preceded them, which is not the same as saying the old powers were wrong or deserved to be defeated. It is simply saying they were defeated and that the winners wrote the story. Here is a detail in the Perseus myth that has always struck me as the most significant and the most underexamined. After Perseus kills Medusa, he puts her head in a bag, and for the rest of his story, he keeps using it. He uses it to turn the sea monster to stone and rescue Andromeda. He uses it at a dinner party to destroy his enemies. He eventually gives it to Athena, who puts it on her aegis, her divine shield, where it continues to petrify enemies for the rest of time. Think about what the myth is actually saying. Perseus kills the monster. He wins. The threat is neutralized. And then he immediately picks up the severed head and uses it as a weapon. The monster is dead, but the power is not. The power never dies. It is too old, too fundamental to simply stop existing because the being it belonged to has been killed. All Perseus did was separate the power from the person who held it. He didn't destroy the Gorgon power. He transferred it into the hands of a hero, into the protection of Athena, into the permanent defensive arsenal of the Olympian order. You cannot destroy the terrifying powers that predate civilization. You can defeat them, redirect them, incorporate them, but they do not go away. They become part of the structure that supposedly replaced them, which is exactly what happened to Medusa in the cultural record. She was officially a monster. She was officially killed, and her face was on every temple, every shield, every coin, every threshold. Still working, still protecting, still there. The myth says Perseus won. The archaeological record says Medusa never stopped watching. The real Medusa, underneath the hero's journey, underneath the Ovidian tragedy, underneath the centuries of sculpture and painting, is one of the most complex figures in world mythology. She is a protective goddess, rewritten as a monster when the religion she belonged to was superseded. She is a victim of divine violence, who was punished for being victimized. She is a figure of power so fundamental that even killing her didn't stop it from working. And she is a face that has been staring out from the walls and shields and coins of Western civilization for 3,000 years. Not as a warning about danger, but as a protection against it. The fear people had of the real Medusa was not the fear of a monster. It was the fear you have in the presence of something genuinely ancient and genuinely powerful, something that operates on a level your civilization's official story doesn't fully account for, something that your hero killed and whose face you nevertheless carved above your front door. The Greeks knew, on some level, that the story they told about her and the use they made of her didn't fully line up. They told the story of Perseus anyway, because it served a purpose, and they kept carving the Gorgonion anyway, because the power was real regardless of how you explained it. What the story of Medusa transmits, if you listen carefully, is this: there are forces in the world that predate civilization's categories of good and evil. They are not on your side, and they are not against you. They simply are what they are: old, powerful, fundamental. And the correct relationship with them is not destruction. It is a careful, respectful engagement, represented by the Gorgonion on the shield. We see you. We know what you are. We are not going to look away. Medusa has been dead for 3,000 years in the story. Her head hangs on Athena's shield. Perseus got the glory. The monster was slain. And her face is still on every threshold, still on museum walls and tattoo parlors and feminist reclamations and horror films. She did not lose. She changed forms. The thing about a truly ancient power is that it doesn't need a body. It doesn't need the official story to acknowledge it. It finds its way into the culture through the back door, through the image carved above the temple door, through the face on the coin, through the story that keeps getting told even after the civilization that told it has collapsed. The real Medusa was never just a monster. She was a boundary marker between the world civilization built and the world that existed before it, between the light of Olympus and the old dark from which everything came. Perseus may have carried the head, but the head